Thank you all for coming to my session, or our session right now, for about reinventing CLIs one last time, because who likes CLIs, right? First of all, many thanks to our sponsors, as usual. It's a great conference so far, at least for me. Still a bit tired from yesterday, but it's great. And then let's get into it. So this is Ryan. I'm Jan. We're both Azure Cloud engineers in Switzerland. We both work for Workspace. We do a lot of automation and PowerShell stuff. And in other words, so we're basically the same, but a bit different, but still the same. And sometimes we do podcasts, but really not on a perfect schedule. We'll be planned every 2 weeks, but we don't make it. So let's get into it. So the reason for this talk is basically Microsoft announced the PowerShell Crescendo module. And I thought, finally, someone does something about this terrible CLI landscape that we have currently, with everybody trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again. So you see there's 3 examples of help files for Vagrant, Terraform, and curl. And then you see, for example, in Terraform, if I just give it help, it says, I don't know, help. That's too confusing. And instead, it tells me do -help, but instead of just doing it. And then Vagrant, for example, which is one that really ground my gears last time. You all know what Vagrant does? So it's a tool by HashiCorp that quickly spins up VMs on your machine or wherever. And you can, well, as I said, spin it up, SSH into it, pull it back down. But to pull it back down, it's not Vagrant stop or something that makes sense. It's Vagrant halt. I had to Google for that. So then Crescendo will allow us to solve this, which I'm going to get into afterwards. And then there's some other plus points with the verb-noun syntax that we all love, at least I do. I think it's a work of art. Yeah, that's about it. Let's get into code. So demo stuff. So this could be a bit bigger, right?
Yeah, and this is the worst file to possibly show anybody.
Yes, it is. All right. So this is a Crescendo JSON definition file. Crescendo is on the PowerShell gallery as usual. It's microsoft.powershell.crescendo. And if you get that, you can create these JSON files. Sadly, they didn't include a simple command to get you some scaffolding for this. I don't know why. And then what you do is you define the commands that you want to build into PowerShell. So we chose Terraform here, of course, infrastructure as code stuff. I did just a couple of commands because for some reason Microsoft in the guidelines tells us not to do just the full CLI and support every command and whatsoever, switch. Right, so the first one is Terraform Init, which is always required for any Terraform configuration before you can do anything else. And this is really simple, right? So we define the verb that we want the PowerShell module or command to be afterwards. We define the noun. And then we say the original name, which is, in this case, Terraform. This could be an absolute path to the executable. If you ask me, I would rely on the path variable in all of our systems to get that, because if we don't, if I type in /user/ blah, blah, the absolute path to my machine, which, if you noticed, I'm on Mac, it works on my machine, but it doesn't work on your Windows machines. This way it works on both. Then you need to, or you don't need to, you can define the original command elements, which is basically just parameters or commands that are always passed if you call this function then. So in this case, it's init, because we want to do Terraform init, and then input false. Why did I do that?
Because you want it to be non-interactive.
Right, non-interactive. And then you can define a parameter set, or a couple if you want. In this case, it's all switches, which is really easy, right? So we say we don't, maybe a user doesn't want to use a backend, which is a Terraform specific thing, to where the state is stored. And it's helpful to do validation and planning stuff if you don't need to use that. And if we the type here, we can go for anything normal in PowerShell. In this case, just a switch, which means if the user passes no backend into the parameters, it just adds -- backend false to the actual command then. Then we get some positioning stuff and description and some other stuff. Same for reconfigure and upgrade, which are all, that's all Terraform specific, right? So someone needs to build that for some CLI, and everybody else then can use it normally. And now, you may have noticed, this only gives us the option to call it in PowerShell. This doesn't do anything with the output. One of the big selling points is we get proper PowerShell objects back, right? In this case, it doesn't, because init doesn't return anything really. It just says success or fail. But we have two more commands. The first one is the plan. And in Terraform, if you make some changes to your resources in your configuration, you can do a plan, and then that tells you what that actually translates to in the real world. So you don't just blindly push stuff and, I don't know, remove your domain controllers. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so that works. In this case, I called it get Terraform plan, which, I don't know, maybe it's not the perfect name, but naming is hard, sure. Then we pass in -JSON, because, I'm going to get to that a little later. JSON or CSV output is obviously very easy to parse in PowerShell, right? So then there's the non-interactive stuff again, and more parameters. And then the interesting part. So we have output handlers, which means Crescendo will pass whatever the command that you're calling back to your output handler, which you can write inline in this case. And then if you just use args in the first item in the array, you get the result that it gives you back. And if you then it's easy. You just go for convert from JSON, and basically then with just this part, you already get proper PowerShell objects back. I did some other stuff as well here, because that's Terraform specific. It gives many message stuff, which in this case we don't care about. And then the other one I'm going to get to later. So let's see this. Here I actually have all of this. See, all of my commands. And if I now, I'm going to quickly show that. I'm in this example folder, which contains a really simple Terraform code with deploys a resource group, a storage account, some blobs, and I think it does static website. No, just blobs. And I made some changes that I haven't deployed yet, so that we get something. So now if I just run get Terraform plan, we could go through all the variables, parameters, of course. In this case, we don't care. And we wait and get proper objects back. Which, of course, because I didn't pay attention, we're not saving into any variables.
And one other cool thing to mention was that you can check the schema, and there's a ton of other properties which we aren't even defining here. So,
yeah, exactly, good point.
Yeah, so you could support like pipeline. So if you wanted to,
that's coming up.
Oh, that's coming up. Sorry.
Right. So yeah, this is the schema that is referencing. You need to put that in there so you get IntelliSense, like what's here. So that's all we can set for it. So we can even define a platform if you want to do Windows, Linux, Mac OS, whatever. So let's see our output. Yeah, we got our output. And if we're smarter, we pipe it to some variable, and we can manipulate it. And it's sometimes slow. It took me 20 minutes to deploy storage account before. So now we get this, right? And it's the same, of course. I'm an idiot. And we see the action and the resource, and that's what's interesting for this case. Now, of course, you could do anything with this, like pass it into Universal Dashboard or something, or PSHTML to do some fancy graphics and stuff. and then push it into your pull request or something like that.
And the other example we talk about as well, we do at some customers, is if your Terraform, for example, in this particular case, does deletes, and then you don't want to approve it on your pipeline before some, so you can obviously do whatever you want at that point.
Yeah, so in this case, we have one replace for a storage blob because I renamed it. And did I rename it? Let's see. I didn't rename it, but I changed the name of the blob. Kudos to anyone who knows this HTTP code. Exactly. Right, so then there's the regular plan thing, and then we have more possibilities to do handlers, except for just inline, which of course is easy. I did another inline one here. The more interesting one will come up, where we do exactly what he just said. If we destroy stuff, we're going to print some red output. So let's say we add the parameter destroy, which if we check here is just a switch. If we say destroy, it passes -- destroy into it, and then Terraform plans for if we want to take down all of our resources. And then just added some simple text, which is hopefully going to work. Yeah. You select destroy, this will delete all your stuff. And there you go. Cool. But then the better stuff is when we switch to our apply. So I use start Terraform apply, which again is not ideal, but naming is still hard. We had to add in auto approve here, which is another Terraform quirk. Or actually, that's also because of Crescendo, because we can't interact with CLI this way. So if you do apply, it would usually first do a plan if you don't pass in a plan file, and then ask you if you really approve for it and want to do all of it inline, and that doesn't work. So then we have some more parameter stuff, normal. And here you see the output handler this time isn't inline, it's a function. And also the stream output, which is also cool. So this function just needs to be somewhere in your current session once when you want to export the module with this command down here, which is tiny, of course, sorry. And that command, or that function I wrote in here, is really simple. We just get the input, whatever name we put here, Crescendo automatically passes it into here. Then we do some fancy stuff. We convert it back from JSON again into objects. We do a message output because Terraform gives us lots of messages which we don't want in the actual output that we want to pass on to the pipeline or something, but we want to see nonetheless. And then also we do some replacing because my subscription ID is none of your business. And yeah, let's run that. No, one more point. So you saw the stream output flag. So the other ones didn't have that because the other ones were just waiting until the CLI is done with what it's doing, and then get the whole output from the CLI. In this case, it pipes. Sorry, it pipes whatever the CLI is outputting right to your function, and then you can do fancy stuff so that in this case of Terraform apply. Sometimes you have resources that take a long time to deploy, like, for example, the Azure API management, which takes an hour every time. And just having a prompt that doesn't tell you anything is useless, right? So in this case, we get some messages. And if we're going to do that, Terraform apply. We deploy some stuff. Means just some additional blobs and a name change.
I think you're missing an L.
A what?
An L.
Yeah, but that's just for the output variable. I noticed too. Just doesn't matter in this case. So we get all of this output here because of the function that we wrote, which we use write host again because, as far as I know, that's cool again. And once that's done, we get a, oh, it's already done. We get a proper object fly. Proper object that we can work with. So let's do changes. Let's not do changes. What do you want to do?
Are you in strict mode?
No. Oh, maybe. Yeah, so now we get a proper object that we can work with. I have no real world use case so far, but that's what you would want for an automation, right? Yeah, that's about how that works. If you define all of this stuff in JSON, you're going to have to run export crescendo module with the path to your JSON file, and that then generates a descriptor file, so your manifest file, and the actual module itself, which is auto-generated. Let's collapse this. It does some class stuff, and then it auto-generates your stuff. It's fairly easy, actually. Just they use $__ because I assume that they assume no one else is ever going to do that. And they just take your parameters or your inputs, pass all of it to the CLI with the normal ampersand down here, here, ampersand, run it, pipe it to your handler if it's stream output, or give you the result to your handler. And that's about all from my demo, I think. So you can take over.
Okay. Yeah. So I am a very lazy person. I would do not want to write this massive JSON file. I'm far too lazy for that. So luckily, there is a way that we can do this programmatically. So,
You can take mine.
Sorry, guys. Can you hear me now? Cool. Right. So sorry. So I was saying I'm a very lazy person. So yeah, I would not want to write this JSON file because one, it's very convoluted, and if you think, Jan mentioned that Microsoft doesn't recommend that you create all the CLIs or create commandlets for all of the CLI things, but maybe that's what I would want to do. So there is a way that we can do this. So I created a really basic example. I started creating something much more complicated, but then I thought, okay, I'll try and keep it a little bit simple so that we can go through it together. So basically what we can do is we can just use the help part that Jan was showing in the PowerPoint before, and just parse all of this to generate our crescendo commands. So what I've done here is I've just taken one example, because if I tried to loop over it, that was where it was getting really complicated. But you can see how you could implement this for yourself. So if you have any of your own executables somewhere, or any software anywhere that you would like to automate with crescendo, then you could do the same thing. So you can see here what I'm doing is AZ account list -- help, which gives me some output. So let me just quickly run it. I'm not going to try and pin this to myself. I can type at the same time. Apologies.
Should have done the mic check after all.
I should have done the mic check. Okay. I hope you guys can still hear me. I feel like it's less than it was, but anyway. Okay. So, this is quite a tiny screen down here, isn't it? 1 second. So, can you guys see that at the back? This bit at the bottom here? Or can I just not at all?
Use the proper terminal.
Right. Okay. I can use this terminal. Right. Okay. So
just change the path.
Right. 1 second. Apologies. Right, okay, yes. Right, okay. So, so I'm gonna take this initial piece, and we're just gonna run this, and I can show you basically what we're gonna start working with. So if we just chuck that in there, if I know how to use a Mac.
Command C, Command V.
Right, so you can see here basically this is just the output that you would get from running help. So initially this might not seem particularly useful to you, but when you look at it and break it down, you can see that it's actually quite nicely organized. So what I can do is just parse my way through each line here that's in the help text and say every time there's a reference to arguments, that's probably a parameter that I need to create. Anytime there's a reference to global arguments, I can create it, but maybe I need to exclude some of those options. So like verbose might not be interesting to me, help definitely isn't interesting to me, and neither is debug. So let's see how that could be done. So the actual code itself, is that big enough? Or can I, yeah, I think the code is big enough. That's fine. Yeah. Can I? Right, cool. So yeah, so what I'm doing here is there are some commands that Crescendo provides you. So this new Crescendo command you can use to create the initial sort of PowerShell object, which you can use to convert to JSON later on. So I've just said new Crescendo command, verb and noun, like Jan was mentioning before. So I'm just going to say get Azure CLI account. And then you can see I'm just filling up with some information. So the original text and the original command elements. So these are the bits that Jan mentioned before. So when I'm running Azure account list, I need to say Azure AZ, which is obviously the executable, and then the parts account and list. And then you can see I'm just going to go for a little bit of a joyride here. So I'm just going to for each of the lines in the help text, and I'm just going to say, okay, every time I see a command, or every time I see the block command, then that's referring to the description. So then I set the mode to description. Every time I see arguments or global arguments, etc., etc. And then I do another loop once I've looped around again and say, okay, well, if we're working on the description, then I'll set the description. If I'm working on the parameters, then I am probably the craziest person that's you'll meet when it comes to regex. I use it a lot. So here, this is just some convoluted regex, which if you look at this thing here, basically says, if you see this dash dash, then if you see this dash dash here, that refers to a parameter. So grab the piece after the dash dash, ignore all of this stuff in the middle, and then grab this piece here on the end, and that refers to the description. If we take another example of set and look at the set, you'll see here that the name is required. So we also catch that as well. So if the parameter is mandatory, then we'll set it as well. So once we've done that, we create our little params here, and we just and this is another small little piece of thing that just covers a really niche case where if the help test goes over 2 lines. So yeah, so the idea is that I'm going to make this code available after the session, and I'll add the for each loop piece in. So if you have any of your own command lines that you want to automate, you can take this code and should be able to do it really easily and immediately have a PowerShell command to do all of that. So yeah, then once we've looped around and created all of the parameter blocks, we actually instantiate them in Crescendo, and we add them to our end object. And then coming back to the last piece that Jan mentioned before, which was the output handler. So I've just done a very basic inline one, like what he showed you at the beginning. So just arg0 outstring convert from JSON. And then I just write that out to a file. So you can see I'm writing out to this bin directory, and then I run the export Crescendo command. So the whole thing now, instead of now creating this however big file this is, 124 line file, I can now just have my script which I can run, which is almost the same size, but you can see what I mean. Obviously, it scales obviously a lot better. This will be able to create that file for me. So because I rushed this and built this in a container in code spaces, there's something I just need to quickly do here. So bear with me. Yeah. So now, if I was to run this this file, this script I just showed you guys. Hello. Oh, of course. Sorry, apologies. Here we go. So if we run this, it fails because I don't have the directory which I just said I created. 1 second. Right, yeah, so that's now got created. So now if we look, we'll go back to here, we ended up with our JSON file, which is the one that we saw Jan create before. So you can see nice file with all of the information in that we needed to run in order to get it to work. And then from that, we ran the export Crescendo command, and that gave us our module definition and our PowerShell file. Exactly the same as what Jan showed you before. So then, I guess the only thing left to do is just to show that it actually works. So if we go and we import this Azure CLI PSD command, we can run get Azure CLI. Oh yeah, I could even show just, but I mean, not super interesting per se, but search CLI. Yeah, so you can see we've got this get Azure CLI account. This might fail on your machine because I guess you probably aren't logged in right now, but we'll see. We'll see what it does.
Terraform.
Oh, of course, yeah. So you can see now we've got PowerShell objects for the Azure CLI.
I went to great lengths to hide all my IDs, and there they are.
Away with you. So there you go. So that is in a nutshell how you can automate that entire process and be able to create all of your CLIs as PowerShell things. Yeah. So I'll pass you back to Jan. You're mic'd up again. That's good.
Yep. We're back up and running. So, as I mentioned before, Microsoft says, or they give guidelines to find a proper target for Crescendo, and they say don't just go ahead and put all of it in Crescendo, which, well, I would definitely like to just always use PowerShell syntax, but I understand that they probably had this classic XKCD comic in mind with the way that standards proliferate, right? So first of all, we have 14 or like 20,000 CLIs with all different standards. So we said, no, we're going to create a new one that covers all the use cases, and then there's just one more. Yeah. That's probably the reason, but I don't know. And that's about it. I think we can proceed to the Q&A if there's any questions. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so what you show at the end, I think it's really cool that you can actually create JSON structure with PowerShell.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, is there a way to share it with other people, like PS Gallery or so, or how would you recommend to doing that? Do you share code over GitHub?
Yes, we're going to put it on GitHub. So we've got our own repo where we store all of our sessions. It will go onto the PSConfEU repo as well. The only thing I would say is that I would try to make that function, or whatever I'm going to call it, as generic as possible, but inevitably there are, as you saw,
different every time.
Differences between the CLIs. So I'll try and make it so you can change the regex so that you can identify each line individually. But yeah, it would have to be done every time differently.
So the question was more generically though. Like usually, if you do something like that, you would write a wrapper module or something.
Yeah,
like that,
that's basically just what it is.
And you would ship it to PowerShell Gallery, right? So
yeah,
you can. The thing is, once you have exported into the module in the descriptor file, then you don't need any dependency on Crescendo anymore. It's just a regular module file that, well, has the dependency on your executable, but if you really want, you can ship that with the module, right? Which maybe I wouldn't do, but you could. And you have no more dependencies.
Yeah, and then like to the point, you can push it then into the gallery. Yeah, so you would distribute it via the gallery, if that's what you wanted to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is there any kind that we could improve parameters kind of more? Because when I follow the lead, for example, is there any method where you can say, okay, I just want to make confirm to this, to attend to this, if the command doesn't support us, basically?
So you mean a proper remove command with the confirm global?
For example, if I have some stupid application which removes something, I can say, okay, I want to extend this so that I have to confirm to this.
Well, not really, because with Crescendo you can't interact with the CLI. So you tell it once what it's supposed to do, and you parse the output in whatever way you want. If it's just JSON, then it's easy. Otherwise, it's pain. But you can't go back and forth. So you can't just ask, hey, what are you going to do? And then if the confirm flag exists, I'm going to check first with the user, which PowerShell, of course, could do, but Crescendo can't, because then it couldn't talk back to the CLI, so it would have a separate command for that.
I mean, what you could do, I mean, this is okay. I mean, the benefit of Crescendo is it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for you, which is why it's limited in some areas. But just speaking to that one point you just said, what you could do is, let's take Terraform, for example. We run the apply without the auto approve. It would show the plan first. What we could do is say, okay, instead of running that, we could use the benefits of the output handler to sort of do everything and say, okay, I'm going to run, when you run apply, actually we're going to run plan in the background, catch it in the output handler, write a ton of code in between to send a message to the user saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Are you sure that's what you want to do? And then run another command afterwards in the output handler. Sort of not really what it was designed for, but you can definitely hack it to do that sort of thing. But then, as I say, you're sort of getting into the territory of maybe you just write your own wrapper like where you just do everything sort of yourself. But yeah, that's sort of the trade-off you need to decide.
Yeah. Yep.
What about the error handlers? So when you run the command line tool from the PowerShells or ampersand, usually this error variable is not populated. So when you want to check the status, you need to check like last exit code.
Mm-hmm.
So does Crescendo somehow handle this?
I don't know, to be honest, but I expect not, because we use the ampersand, which creates a child scope, right? So I wouldn't expect the error variable to be populated.
I mean, it's something you could handle if maybe just to check it, but you could handle it in an output handler. You just have a custom.
Yeah, I mean, you can just the error that the CLI is going to output, that's going to be passed to your output handler, so you could handle it that way. Yeah.
Just to say, the output handler gets run every time. So even if it exited like with exit code 0 or something, and there was another way you could check the status of that thing, like you said, you could check the last exit code, or you could check maybe a log file or something, then you could say, okay, well, we know because the state log file is still open that something's gone wrong or whatever. So you can really, like, trying to think of the verb, I can't think, but yeah, like use the output handler for whatever you want. Mm-hmm. It's just a script block you can do whatever you like with.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as I understood, this is some kind of tool to create proxy CLIs.
Yeah.
Still rely on the base module to be executed.
Still rely on the executable.
On executable.
Yeah.
That is called.
Yeah.
So wrapping the executable into something more command-like.
Yes, into PowerShell-like stuff. Yeah, with proper syntax. But you're always going to have the dependency on the executable itself, but no dependency on Crescendo.
And I can define parameter sets that I want to use.
Yep. You can have multiple parameter sets defined just as you do normally in PowerShell. I glanced over this up here because for the plan, when you do the destroy flag, I added this into a separate parameter set so that I can handle it separately. So this is then the output handler for the destroy parameter set, which gives you that little red line of text that tells you that you're going to delete all your stuff. But you can go as far as you want with this. So create parameter sets and handle everything differently.
Is there a way to create like markup documentation from the JSON file that I can provide with the CLI that I create? I imagine shipping the original command line tool from a lot of options and then passing it on to some service test, for example.
So Crescendo actually does some of this for you. So it has some definitions here for original text, original help text, and then also it will generate, if you just look at the PSM1 file, you'll see that that it generates all of the inline comment-based help. So you do get something out of it. Creating like markdown-based help is something that you could do.
With platypus, but that's more for interactive stuff, right? So
yeah, but
you'd have to write your documentation yourself.
But this is the glory of PowerShell, that
right.
you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, so you could output into, well, whatever file Platypus takes in these days, and then generate it that way. Yeah, you could do that, yeah.
Cool.
So I was wondering as well, did you guys collect any information on how to test stuff like this? Or would you just test what comes out on your end? Or?
So there are no PESA tests that we wrote for any of these things, but yeah, I would, if I was running this in production for somebody, I would do the straight up executable version, see what the output is, and then just do it should be exactly what the other task did. And yeah, so I would definitely build integration tests around this. Yeah, I guess it depends on who your target audience is and how much time and effort you've got. But yeah, I'm generally someone that likes to build tests. So yeah, it's good. Good point.
You're first.
Stream output true in your example. How Crescendo does understand this is the first JSON line, this is the second JSON line, and so on.
Yes, so Crescendo does in the end just this right here. So it calls your actual CLI and then just uses PowerShell's magic and pipes it to your handler. So if we try, let's get back to my folder.
For instance, if my CLI just printed in the console, not the full JSON, but only the first part of the JSON.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
That's exactly what happens. So if we do plan JSON and then pipe that to, where do you want to pipe that?
I think the point you're trying to make there is that, like, if, for example, he was to do a for each and like append something on the string, every single line of JSON would have a pre-appended string, which is what you're trying to say. So if you tried to then convert it from JSON, you would end up with an invalid object. So you as the developer of this module, need to understand what the XE is doing. So in this case, we know that it's writing out the plan line for line, so we can't use stream output. So unfortunately, we have to let you wait until the whole thing runs before we can give you the output. Whereas for the plan, we don't need to do any of that parsing, or we know that the objects that it gives are going to come in one line so that we can do it in the stream output way. So yeah, there's nothing that Crescendo can really do about that. It's something that you as the person who's writing it needs to understand about the executable, how it's handling that.
Actually, not the heroes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yep. And one?
Is there any way to handle like syntax changes in the underlying CLI?
So you mean if there's
New version and the comment name changed or something?
Well, that's what testing would be for, right?
Well, but yeah, basically what you're saying is it would require a rebuild of the module.
Yeah.
So if you're doing it automatically, then that's really good, obviously, because you would just say, okay, I've now got 1.1 of my XE, rerun the thing and it detects the change, rebuilds the module, and then you've got a 1.1 module. Yeah. If you've written it all manually, like we did in the first example, it becomes quite difficult to manage, and you would have to obviously then know, oh, okay, now this parameter has changed or whatever. So it can be tricky if you're not automating it.
Okay, but I can't say like, okay, if the version of the XE is 1.0, I have like these commands, and if it's 2.0, I have like this.
You want to handle that so you can support multiple in the same module version? Don't think so. Let's see.
No, no. There's no logical way I can think of doing it, because all it's doing realistic. I mean, again, I'm just thinking about it out loud, and it would what you could do this, but it would be disgusting. Is so. If you've just seen in the background what it's doing, it's grabbing this variable here, this original name variable, and these blocks underneath. So what you could do is you could put code in there to say, detect if it has this version, do this, and then it's going to output the version that it's running. So you would write, basically, instead of these being strings, this would actually be PowerShell code, and it would execute the PowerShell code instead of just returning the string. So yes, not advised.
Yep. Rather build different modules for different CLI versions.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Yep.
You would version the module, yeah. But I can see your point. Like if you'd have to have two module versions if you had both executables at the same time, and you'd have to then you can't import two module versions at the same time, can you? Or can you? I think one overwrites the other, so yeah, you would have to have like two sessions. It would be a bit of a pain. So, I see your point, but yeah. Yeah,
but that would be an argument to ship the executable with the module. Yeah.
Sure.
Kinda.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if there's no more questions, then that concludes our session. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.